as well as colleagues and students sitting in a range of institutions across the country, many of whom are sitting here today. Greg worked hard to reconceptualize our PhD and master's programs in educational culture, policy, and society, programs that focus on the role of education, kindergarten through postgraduate study, plays in the larger society. A multidisciplinary program that employs the methods, theories, and empirical insights of the social sciences and humanities. Faculty and students study the linkages between and among educational institutions and broader social, cultural, political, and economic formations in massively shifting context, wherein inequalities of educational achievement, attainment, occupational status, income, and wealth are intensifying both within and between nations every single year. Greg worked tirelessly to transform this program, bringing it squarely in line with contemporary empirical realities, and much of this work reverberates throughout all of our interactions that we have in this room. Although Greg focused much of his attention on diverse racial ethnic groups within the US, he simultaneously pressed, implored us actually, to acknowledge the increasingly globalized and knowledge-based economy that demands that we take seriously the transnational migration of commerce, capital, and peoples, and the implications of such for the production and new productions of education and social structure. We owe a great intellectual and practical debt to Greg for helping us realize this conception at the University of Buffalo in particular, and its spreading wings through our large critical community. Greg was most definitely this man that I described, and he was most definitely the man that everyone else has talked about. A committed scholar, mentor, teacher, editor, and more recently, administrator, because we do need smart administrators. And I was very happy that he took on that position. Greg was also my very close personal friend and colleague, as he was for many of us in this room. We used to laugh uproariously at some of the things that happened at the university and in the profession more broadly. And of course, no, we laughed at nobody who's sitting in this room. As he and I both understood that laughter, is what Fazal was talking about, that laughter is sometimes the only thing that can get one through the day. And that one can't always live in the space of being morose. We shared AERA, edited a book together, wrote together, built a program, and talked constantly. We actually gossiped. Greg was a great gossip. I don't know how many of you know that. But again, nobody in this room. But he was a great gossip. Always peppered with unbelievable laughter, punctuated by sheer fun, as we moved through the university and the profession together as good colleagues and good friends. Conversations would begin with such things as, "You won't believe this," or "You won't believe what I just saw," or "How so-and-so is behaving," and often ended in tears of laughter. I know his mentors well, and they are very fine people, and you have helped to produce this very great person, all of you. All of us continue to comprise a community that will stand the test of time. Men and women of varying ages, national background, institutional location, geographic location, whether the US or elsewhere, we collectively encapsulate so much that the university sector holds dear, and so much that Greg held dear and passed on to the next generation. This is reflective of our deep commitment to both good disciplinary-based scholarship and to broadening opportunities for the historically disenfranchised, whether in the US or elsewhere. We were also committed to having a really good time while doing it, and savored chances to bring all members of our large international community together, of which Greg was a key player. Sadly, of course, this gathering of our international friends and nationally based friends is in Greg's honor. The best of the best, Greg's wealth of sheer smarts, kindness, and dedication, his spirit and internalized debt to those who lack privilege, as well as his ability to comprehend the lived realities and associated contradictions of those with privilege, are incredibly rare. He was an integral part of our wide-ranging critical community, and we will all miss his respect across intellectual difference and dedication to collective work. He made our work not only feel and become ever more important, but just plain fun, at least at times. To Michelle, his wife, to Christina, his sister, to Ira, his cousin, and to all of Greg's family who was with us many of them, at the memorial at the University of Buffalo. Thank you so much for sharing your beloved Greg with us. We can never repay you for this extraordinary debt and opportunity. We will all be forever saddened by his early departure and simultaneously forever grateful that you were so kind as to share him with us. It's fitting to conclude with a set of excerpted lines from Ithaca, Constantine Cavafy's well-known poem. Born of Greek parentage in Alexandria, Egypt, his lines evoke both promise and a life well lived. This poem evokes not only Greg's individual insights, individual work, but all of our collective spirit and all of our collective work toward making the world a better place. Apologies in advance for lifting lines out of this extraordinary poem, but it's quite lengthy, and I just selected some that convey its spirit. As you set out for Ithaca, hope the voyage is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery. May there be many a summer morning when, with what pleasure, what joy, you come into harbors seen for the first time. May you stop at Phoenician trading stations to buy fine things, mother of pearl and coral, amber and ebony, sensual perfume of every possible kind, as many sensual perfumes as you can. And may you visit many Egyptian cities to gather stores of knowledge from other scholars. Keep Ithaca always in your mind. Arriving there is what you are destined for. Ithaca gave you, and all of us, this marvelous journey. Without her, you never would have set out. She has nothing left to give you now. And if you find her poor, Ithaca won't have fooled you. Wise as you will have become, so full of experience, you will have understood by then, finally, what these Ithacas mean. So long, my and our good friend, family member, and colleague, Ithaca indeed paved your way. Let it sustain our journey forward. From the bottom of my heart and from the bottom of our collective hearts as we sit here, thank you for everything.
I am Michelle Fine. Janet and I have been giving too many memorials at this AERA. As with many wonderful experiences in my life, Greg came to me via Lois. He sat next to me in 1998 at Sarah's bat mitzvah. He looked about as out of place as I felt. It might have been one of his first, it was my 100th. He was so earnest. He must have been very new to the university, right? He was so earnest and so smart and so relational. It was kind of like automatic over chopped liver that we got to know each other. And That was more than 15 years ago. Years later, I would return to Buffalo to give a lecture, and in the middle of the lecture, I fainted. This has happened before. It might happen again. It might happen now. Greg, I think, came to the hospital with us. But I know, and it was humiliating, I was at Buff General, and I was on ambulance, and people who had been shot, and I was like, anyway. He emailed me every day for weeks to find out if I was okay. We barely knew each other. And every time I was at Buffalo, how many of you were students of, I'm about to say something loving and funny, and I hope you. So every time I was at Buffalo, Greg would introduce me to these brilliant, amazing, but a little quirky crowd of students who were doing things I knew nothing about, and he was sure I would have something to offer. He believed in me as much as he believed in you, and he was great. And then he came to CUNY more recently, and he did there what I didn't do at Buffalo. He just dove in, and he picked up so many of the students I was working with and gave them new arms and legs and heads and texts and books and lunches and things to think about, and Eve and Valerie among them gave them kind of new lives. He became CUNY. He hung out in Jean Annion's class. He loved it. So I loved Greg more than I knew him, to be fair. You all knew him well. I just loved him. I'm an easy hit. And so, Michelle and Christine, I have to tell you that I knew 3 things about his body. I knew that he had a brilliant mind. It was just like a fountain, right? And then he would cite things a little like Maxine, like he just thought you knew them, and it was humiliating, like you couldn't say, stop, you lost me a paragraph ago, but he was really accessible. It's not that he was intimidating, he had a brilliant mind. And he was dedicated to excavating those texts that we were about to lose. He did an excavation archival project for critical educational studies that's such a gift. A history of classics and critical work, always brokering a new edge for conversation. So for those of you who raised him, mazel tov. The second body part, he had a huge, huge heart. Really an unbelievable heart. At one point, Teachers College Press called us and said, get your book nominated for some AERA, something, anyway. So I thought, who can I ask to do a really quick, deep, amazing review? And I thought, I love Lois. Lois is not going to do it, right? I wouldn't do it. I knew that. So I called Greg, and I was horrified that I kind of called him. He was honored that I asked him. And he wrote this, he understood our book, a book that Mike Fabricant and I wrote, much better than we did, just so much smarter. And when I thanked him profusely, he really said, I was honored that you asked. And I think maybe he was. So the third part of his body is not a part of bodies I talk a lot about. And it has to do with his soul. Greg had a soul that traveled. It traveled across continents, it traveled across texts. Sometimes I thought it traveled across bodies, and so it's very interesting. We haven't met, but it's very interesting that his last essay is traveling home. Because I had a sense that, remember when my mom was dying and I was in therapy and I said, I wish I could just enter her body to carry the pain. And when I said that, I thought of Greg, and then when Greg passed, I thought of that again. And I thought that he had this mobile soul that was able to dip into the heart and soul of Dewey and Marx and Freud, but also Tupac and the hip hop kids that he hung out with. And he brought out the best in him even as he took them into his own body, worrying about what's a white guy doing in Black culture, but not worried so much to stay away, more interested in the intersex. And he was so taken with the fact that hip hop culture traveled, the mobility of it, that he wasn't a margin-center theorist. He was about margins and then more radical margins and circuits. So he was so taken that hip hop was in Arab youth in Paris and in Palestine and in Maori youth. I had a sense that this capacity to be a soul traveler was his gift and his burden. So thinking about Greg has helped me to metabolize so many of the losses that we've endured through whatever version of family AERA is. The loss of friends and colleagues, witnessing a brutal state violence in our country and internationally, and the betrayal and death of our political dreams. 2 minutes, I'm good. So as I lean back on the pillow of Greg, as his soul has comforted me even during AERA, even in my Sheraton hotel pillow, I feel comforted by his legacy of deep inquiry, desires for good, insatiable conversations. I always felt like I wasn't good enough for the conversation. It's very funny, like he was so hungry and so good and so smart, and I always felt like I left him a little hungry, because, anyway. For boundless generosity, for real love of family across generations and zip codes, and certainly meeting Michelle and then